My name is Alex. I'm 32 years old, and I've been a freelance software developer for the past 10 years. I built my career from scratch, starting as a junior developer at a small tech company, and over time, growing into a respected professional working independently. Everything in my life seemed to be on track, until one unexpected phone call changed everything. It all started off like any normal day. I was working from home, developing software applications, building products for high-profile clients. I loved my job. There's a sense of fulfillment that comes from coding something from nothing and seeing it transform into a product that people use. But things weren't as perfect as they seemed on the surface. Despite my efforts, no matter how much I accomplished, I always felt like I wasn't quite meeting expectations. My boss, David, was a difficult person to impress. He never seemed fully satisfied with my work, even when I delivered exactly what was asked. I had been working with him for several years, and the tension was growing. Every meeting, every email seemed to reinforce the feeling that nothing I did was good enough. David was an ambitious and detail-oriented person. To him, success wasn't just about completing the job. It was about exceeding expectations in a way that no one else could. His standards were sky high, and no matter how hard I tried to meet them, I felt like I was always falling short. He often criticized my work, pointing out small details that didn't meet his standards. "You could do better, Alex," he'd say in his calm, almost patronizing tone. He didn't understand that I was already giving everything I had, but I never said anything, at least not to his face. I always tried to smile and push through the tension. This constant pressure took its toll on me. I started feeling like I was walking on eggshells at work. Every project I started felt like a challenge I had to overcome, and the constant criticism made it feel like there was no way to succeed. But I kept going. I had a mortgage, bills to pay, and the pressure of proving myself. In the background, I had a supportive girlfriend, Emma, who was always there for me. She never understood why I was so hard on myself, but I couldn't shake the feeling that my career wasn't where it should be. I always dreamed of building something bigger, something more impactful. But at that moment, it felt like I was stuck in a cycle of endless demands and constant dissatisfaction. One particular morning, I woke up to a missed call from David. I had been expecting a review of my latest project, an update for one of our major clients. When I finally returned the call, David's voice was calm, but there was an undertone of something I couldn't quite place. "Alex, we need to talk. Come to the office." I knew something was off. David rarely called me in for a meeting unless it was serious. When I arrived at the office, I was greeted by a stern expression on his face. He didn't even offer a handshake. Instead, he motioned for me to sit down. "Alex," he began, "I've been thinking about your work here for some time now. You've been with us for 10 years, and we value your contributions, but I think it's time for a change." My heart sank. I could feel the weight of the words before he even finished. This wasn't just a critique. It was something far more serious. I sat there, trying to keep my composure, but my mind was racing. What did he mean by a change? Did this mean I was being let go? "Alex, we've decided to part ways," David finally said. "Your work has been great, but we're moving in a different direction." When David said those words, "We're moving in a different direction," the world around me seemed to freeze. My mind couldn't process what I was hearing. 10 years. 10 years of blood, sweat, and sleepless nights spent building my career, and in just a few words, it was all gone. I sat there, staring at him, my hands gripping the armrests of the chair, feeling the cold sweat begin to form on my palms. I wasn't angry, not yet. I was just numb. The words kept echoing in my head, replaying over and over again. We value your contributions, but we're moving in a different direction. What did that even mean? I wanted to say something, to ask him why, to demand some kind of explanation, but nothing came out. My mind was clouded with confusion. The one thing I had been sure of in my life, my work, was now slipping away. David was looking at me, waiting for a response. I forced myself to speak, my voice shaky but controlled. I don't understand. Why now? I've been giving everything I have to this job. I tried to keep my tone neutral, not wanting to show the frustration building up inside me. David sighed, like he had rehearsed this speech 1,000 times. Alex, it's not about you. It's about the company's future. We need someone who can take us in a different direction. We're restructuring, and we think it's best if you pursue other opportunities. I felt like the ground was being pulled out from under me. The room felt smaller, the air heavier. I had spent 10 years giving everything to this company, building relationships, putting in long hours. And now I was being told that I wasn't enough, that I wasn't the right fit. It was like being told that everything I had done meant nothing. Is this really happening? I muttered under my breath, more to myself than to him. David didn't respond. He simply nodded. We'll give you a severance package. HR will take care of the details. I'm sorry it had to end this way, Alex. The weight of those words, I'm sorry, felt like an insult. He didn't seem sorry at all. This was business. This was cold, calculated, and professional. It wasn't personal. But it felt very personal to me. I stood up, trying to hold back the wave of emotions threatening to overwhelm me. I guess there's nothing more to say. I turned to leave, but before I did, I looked back at David. Thank you for the opportunity, I guess. The words felt hollow coming out of my mouth. I walked out of his office, my legs unsteady beneath me. My mind was racing, my heart pounding in my chest. I could feel the blood rushing to my ears, the sound of my footsteps echoing through the empty halls of the office. I wanted to scream, to lash out, but I didn't. Instead, I kept walking, as if on autopilot, until I reached the exit. I stepped outside into the bright afternoon sun, but I couldn't feel the warmth. My hands were shaking, and my chest felt tight. I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself, but the reality of what had just happened was settling in. I had been fired, and for the first time in a decade, I didn't know what to do next. I tried to call May, my girlfriend, but my phone was vibrating with calls and messages from clients, colleagues, and even friends. They had heard the news already. I didn't even have to tell them. They had all sensed something was coming, and now it was official. I was no longer employed. My future was uncertain. I stepped into the street, barely aware of the passing cars and people around me. It was as if the world had moved on without me. I didn't know where to go, what to do. I felt completely lost. I had poured so much of myself into my career, and now it was gone. I didn't want to go home and face May yet. I needed time to process everything, to figure out how I was going to explain this to her. How was I supposed to tell her that the life we had built together was now crumbling? I found myself wandering aimlessly through the city. My thoughts were a blur, a mixture of anger, disbelief, and confusion. I kept asking myself the same questions. What went wrong? What did I miss? I had done everything right, hadn't I? I had worked hard, delivered results, and always tried to exceed expectations. But here I was, standing in the middle of the street, with nothing. The phone rang again. This time, it was from HR. They were calling to finalize my severance package. As I answered, I could barely focus on what they were saying. It was all just background noise. When I hung up, I stood there for a moment, the weight of everything pressing down on me. I had been fired, and now I had to figure out how to move forward. The days following my firing passed in a haze. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was walking through life on autopilot, just going through the motions without truly being present. The world around me continued as usual, people still rushing through their days, but I felt like I had been left behind. I didn't know where I fit anymore. I avoided calling May at first. What could I say to her? I've been fired, May. Everything I worked for, all the plans we made, are gone. It didn't feel real, and I couldn't bring myself to tell her. For the first time in years, I had no structure, no routine. My morning ritual of waking up early, making coffee, and logging into my laptop was now replaced with long hours of staring at the ceiling or aimlessly scrolling through job listings that seemed more discouraging by the minute. At night, I would lie awake, the silence in my apartment unbearable. The weight of uncertainty pressed down on me, and I began to question everything. Did I make the wrong choices? Was I too focused on my career? Had I sacrificed too much for something that wasn't guaranteed? In those moments of doubt, I thought about David's words. We need someone who can take us in a different direction. It stung. It wasn't just about the job. It felt like a rejection of everything I had built. In a way, I felt betrayed. I had been loyal, dedicated, and yet it wasn't enough. I spent the next few days calling clients and colleagues, tying up loose ends. They were supportive, but it was clear that the company had already started moving on. I wasn't sure how to feel about that. On one hand, I was glad I had built good relationships over the years. On the other hand, it was a harsh reminder that no matter how much you give, the world doesn't stop spinning when you fall. One afternoon, I finally worked up the courage to call May. I didn't want to worry her, but I knew I couldn't hide the truth forever. "Hey, May," I said. When she answered, my voice sounded different, distant, almost hollow. "Alex, what's going on? You've been so quiet," she replied. I paused, not knowing where to begin. "May, I've been fired." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. "What? No, that doesn't make sense. You've been with that company for years. What happened?" I could hear the disbelief in her voice. "I don't really know, May. They just told me they're going in a different direction. After 10 years, that was it." She sighed, and I could hear the concern in her voice. "I'm so sorry, Alex. This is really hard. But we'll figure it out. You're going to be okay." I wanted to believe her, but I didn't feel okay. I felt lost. My career had defined so much of who I was. Without it, I didn't know what I had left. "We'll talk more when I get home," May said. "But don't worry, okay? We're in this together." That evening, when she came home, we sat down together. I could see the worry in her eyes, but she was trying to remain positive for both of us. "What's the plan, Alex? What are you thinking?" I had no idea how to answer her. I wanted to believe things would get better, that this was just a bump in the road. But at that moment, I couldn't see the way forward. I didn't even know where to begin. "Maybe I'll take some time off, I said, trying to sound reassuring, clear my head, figure out what I want to do next. May nodded, but I could tell she wasn't convinced. "That's fine, but we need to start thinking about the future, Alex. We can't just wait for things to happen." She was right. I couldn't sit around feeling sorry for myself. The reality was, I needed to take action. I couldn't afford to dwell in my frustration and confusion. I needed to find a way to move forward, even if it meant stepping into the unknown. The next day, I updated my resume and began reaching out to contacts I had made over the years. I wasn't sure if any of them could help, but I figured it was worth a shot. After all, I had built a solid network. I had worked with some of the best in the industry, and I was good at what I did. But the more I looked at my resume, the more I realized how much I had tied myself to one company, one identity. I had been so focused on my job that I hadn't thought about the bigger picture. What if there were other opportunities out there? What if I could do something even better? I also started considering my options outside of traditional employment. Freelancing had been a great source of income over the years, but maybe it was time to focus on something more creative, something that truly brought me joy, instead of just paying the bills. Maybe I could pursue some of the ideas I had put on the back burner for years. I had always wanted to work on a tech startup, or maybe even start my own business. But that was easier said than done. The fear of failure was overwhelming. Could I really take that leap? Could I leave behind everything I knew and start from scratch? That night, as I sat at my desk, I had a realization. I had been looking at this all wrong. Instead of seeing this as a setback, maybe it was an opportunity. An opportunity to redefine who I was, to build something of my own, and to take control of my future. But it wasn't going to be easy. I would have to push through my self-doubt, take risks, and embrace the unknown. It was time to stop being afraid of failure and start being afraid of not trying at all. The next morning, I made a promise to myself. I would take this time to focus on what truly mattered. I wasn't going to let fear stop me. It was time to start a new chapter in my life. The next few days were a blur. I spent a lot of time reflecting on what I had learned during my years in the industry, trying to figure out what exactly I wanted to do next. The idea of freelancing, starting a tech startup, or even pursuing some of my old creative ideas began to feel less like a fantasy and more like a possible reality. But with that realization came the undeniable pressure of uncertainty. No matter how much I tried to convince myself that everything would be fine, I couldn't escape the feeling of fear that lingered in the back of my mind. What if it all failed? What if I couldn't make it on my own? The worst part was the feeling of being alone in this. May was supportive, but I could tell she was worried. She wanted me to find something stable again, something that would bring us security, but I knew I couldn't go back to what I had before. That life was no longer mine to reclaim. I had spent so much time trying to meet the expectations of others, clients, bosses, even family, that I had forgotten what I wanted. Now, it was time to figure that out. I spent long hours brainstorming ideas, researching potential business models, and reconnecting with people I had worked with over the years. I was determined to move forward, but every step forward felt like I was standing at the edge of a cliff, peering into the unknown below. One evening, I was sitting at my desk, reviewing some of the projects I'd worked on in the past, when I received an email from an old colleague. His name was Jack, and we had worked together on a few big projects when I was still at the company. We had kept in touch off and on, but I hadn't heard from him in a while. "Hey, Alex," the email started. "I know you've been going through a rough patch recently, and I just wanted to reach out. I've been thinking about some of the projects we worked on and how great the ideas were. I've got a proposition for you. If you're interested, let me know if you want to grab coffee sometime." I sat back in my chair staring at the screen. For a brief moment, I wondered if it was a coincidence. But then I realized that I needed to be open to any opportunity that came my way. I responded quickly, setting up a meeting with Jack for the next afternoon. The next day, I found myself sitting across from Jack at a small cafe. He was an energetic guy with a lot of ideas and an entrepreneurial mindset. He didn't waste any time getting to the point. "I know you've been thinking about branching out on your own," Jack said. "I've been working on something for a while now, a tech startup focused on integrating AI into small businesses to streamline operations. We've got a solid team, and we're at a point where we need someone with your expertise to take us to the next level. What do you think?" I sat there, trying to process what he was saying. Jack had always been ambitious, but this was bigger than I expected. A startup? It felt like a huge leap, one I wasn't sure I was ready to take. But then again, how could I pass up this opportunity? This could be my chance to finally build something of my own, to create something that could change the way businesses operate. "Tell me more," I said, my voice steady despite the excitement building inside me. Over the next hour, Jack outlined the vision for the startup, the team's goals, and the technology they were developing. It was clear they were in the early stages, but the potential was undeniable. They needed someone who could take their ideas and turn them into reality, someone who could design the software architecture and lead the technical side of the business. I sat there, listening to Jack, feeling the weight of the decision ahead of me. This was a massive risk. There was no guarantee of success. But the more I listened, the more I realized that this was exactly what I had been searching for. It wasn't just another job. It was a chance to build something from the ground up, to be part of something meaningful. As the meeting ended, Jack looked at me with anticipation. "So, what do you think? Are you in?" I didn't hesitate. "I'm in." The decision to join the startup wasn't easy, but it was a decision that aligned with everything I had been thinking about over the past few days. It was a leap of faith, but I was ready. I left the cafe, feeling a mix of excitement and fear. My heart was racing, my thoughts scattered, but I couldn't ignore the overwhelming sense of possibility. This was the beginning of something new. That night, I went home and told May. She was happy for me, though I could tell she was still worried. But she knew how much this meant to me. She knew I had been yearning for something more, something that was truly mine. I spent the next few weeks preparing for the transition. I made arrangements to leave my old life behind, my old job, my old routine, and step into a new world. It wasn't going to be easy, but I was determined. The startup was full of challenges, but they were the kind of challenges I had been looking for. There was a sense of urgency, a sense that we were all building something that mattered. Every day was a new opportunity to learn, to grow, and to prove to myself that I could succeed outside the confines of the corporate world. For the first time in months, I felt like I was on the right path. The fear that had paralyzed me in the days following my firing was beginning to fade, replaced by a sense of purpose. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was thriving, taking control of my future, and building something that I could be proud of. The road ahead was still uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like I had the strength to face whatever came my way. The first few weeks at the startup were a whirlwind. Every day felt like a new challenge, a new puzzle to solve. We were building something from the ground up, and I was thrown into the deep end from day one. The excitement I felt walking into the office every morning was balanced by the pressure of delivering on ambitious goals. There was no room for failure, and the stakes were high. As the lead developer, I was responsible for the core technical infrastructure of our platform. I had to design the architecture, build the software, and lead a team of developers who, despite their passion, were still learning the ropes. They were talented, but we all knew we were operating at the edge of our abilities. We were trying to make something groundbreaking with limited resources and time. It was thrilling, but exhausting. Long hours became the norm, and I could feel the weight of every decision I made. There were moments when I questioned whether I had what it took. The startup world was unpredictable, and every day presented new obstacles I hadn't anticipated. We ran into technical challenges that I'd never encountered before. Integration bugs, scaling issues, and tight deadlines tested our resolve. At times, it felt like we were running in circles, trying to catch up with the demands of our investors and clients. But there was something about it that kept me going. The pressure, while overwhelming at times, fueled me. I loved the adrenaline of solving problems on the fly, coming up with creative solutions when everything seemed impossible. The excitement of seeing our ideas take shape, of watching the platform grow and evolve, gave me a sense of accomplishment that I hadn't felt in years. I was finally working on something that truly mattered, something that I could call my own. During one particularly grueling week, after we'd launched a critical update for one of our clients, I found myself sitting at my desk late into the night, staring at lines of code, when Jack came over to check in. "How's it going, Alex?" he asked, his face tired but hopeful. I rubbed my eyes, trying to focus. "It's going slowly. There's a bug we just can't seem to fix. The integration with the third-party service isn't working as expected." Jack nodded, understanding. "I know it's tough, but don't forget why we're doing this. This isn't just about fixing problems. It's about creating something that will change the industry." His words, simple as they were, struck a chord with me. He was right. We weren't just working to solve a series of technical problems. We were building something transformative. And no matter how difficult the journey was, it was worth it. I smiled, feeling the weight of the moment. "You're right. I just need to keep pushing through." The next few days were intense. We worked long hours, often late into the night, but we managed to fix the issue. Our client was happy with the results, and the team celebrated the small victory. It was a reminder of how far we had come and how much more we could achieve if we kept pushing forward. However, it wasn't all smooth sailing. The startup world was volatile, and there were constant shifts in strategy. We often found ourselves adapting to new demands, reassessing priorities, and figuring out where to allocate resources. Sometimes, It felt like we were changing course too often. It was hard to stay focused when everything seemed to be in flux. I had to remind myself why I was here. Because I wanted to build something real. I wanted to prove to myself that I could thrive in this chaotic, high-stakes environment. It wasn't about just surviving. It was about creating something that mattered, something that would leave a legacy. One evening, after another long day of work, I sat down at my desk and reflected on how far we had come. The startup was no longer just a concept. It was becoming a reality. The platform we were building had already started to gain traction, and we were beginning to see interest from potential investors and clients. We had a long way to go, but we were on the right track. It was then that I realized how much I had changed over the past few months. After being fired, I had been terrified of starting over. I was afraid of failing, of making the wrong decision. But now, I was no longer scared of the unknown. I had embraced the challenge, and the uncertainty had become part of the thrill. I was living in the present, focused on building something meaningful. The lessons I had learned in the months since leaving my old job were invaluable. I had learned to trust myself, to trust my instincts, and to take risks. I had learned to embrace failure as part of the process, not something to fear. The most important lesson, however, was this: you can't wait for opportunities to come to you. Sometimes you have to go out and create them yourself. But there were still challenges ahead. The road was long and the pressure was constant, but I was ready. I knew that, no matter what came next, I had the strength and resilience to face it. This was my new beginning, and I wasn't going to let fear stop me from reaching my full potential. The months that followed were a roller coaster. At the startup, things moved at a blistering pace, and there were always more problems to solve than time to fix them. I had come to accept that working at a startup was a constant game of firefighting. Every day felt like a new challenge, one that required creativity, flexibility, and a level of mental stamina that I had never been forced to tap into before. But as the days passed, I began to feel the toll it was taking on me. I had gone from long hours at my old job to even longer hours at the startup. It was different, though. At my previous company, I felt trapped, constantly trying to please people who would never be satisfied. But at the startup, I was building something new, something I truly believed in. Still, the pressure was intense. There were moments when I felt like I was losing myself. I would wake up exhausted, only to dive straight into work again, barely pausing to eat or sleep. The adrenaline kept me going, but I couldn't ignore the weariness that was creeping in. I had once dreamed of having a balanced life, a life where work didn't consume me. But now, it seemed like all I could focus on was pushing through to the next milestone, the next big thing. One evening, after another exhausting day, I sat in my office, staring at the code in front of me. The numbers blurred on the screen, and I could feel my eyes growing heavy. I knew something had to change. This was no longer sustainable. That's when I heard a knock on the door. It was Jack, my co-founder and friend. He had always been a source of energy and optimism. But tonight, his face was unusually serious. "Alex," he said, stepping into the room, "we need to talk." I looked up, rubbing my eyes. "What's going on?" Jack hesitated before sitting down. "I've been noticing how much you're pushing yourself. We all have been. But I'm worried you're burning out." I chuckled dryly. "I'm fine, just a little tired. We've got a lot on our plate, but it's all part of the grind. Jack didn't smile. He leaned forward, his eyes locking with mine. That's the problem, Alex. You keep saying you're fine, but I can see it in your eyes. You're not, and you know it. I swallowed hard, trying to keep my composure. He was right. I had been ignoring the signs for months. The stress, the lack of sleep, the constant pressure. It was starting to catch up with me, and I knew it. But I didn't want to admit it. Admitting it would mean I had failed. Jack's voice softened. You can't do this alone, and you can't keep going at this pace forever. We're all in this together, and I need you at your best, not running on fumes. His words hit me harder than I expected. Jack wasn't just my co-founder. He was my friend. And here he was, telling me something I hadn't been able to say to myself. I had been so focused on proving myself, on showing everyone that I was capable, that I had ignored the most important thing, my own well-being. I don't know what to do, I admitted, my voice cracking. I've pushed so hard to get here, and now I don't know if I'm losing myself in the process. Jack placed a hand on my shoulder. It's not a failure to take a step back, Alex. It's not a failure to ask for help. You're part of a team now. You don't have to carry the weight of the world on your own. His words were a wake-up call. I had been so caught up in the fear of failure and improving myself that I had forgotten what it meant to take care of myself and my relationships. I was so focused on building something meaningful that I had neglected to consider whether the way I was going about it was sustainable. I sat there for a moment, letting the reality of his words sink in. You're right, I finally said. I need to find a balance. I need to stop trying to do everything by myself. The next few days were a turning point for me. I took Jack's advice to heart and started making changes in my approach to work and life. I delegated more tasks to the team, trusting them to handle responsibilities that I had once taken on myself. I set clearer boundaries for work hours, ensuring that I made time for myself and May. I began to prioritize self-care, even if it meant stepping away from work for a few hours each day. It wasn't easy. I felt a sense of guilt whenever I took time off, as if I was letting the team down. But slowly, I began to realize that taking care of myself wasn't a luxury. It was a necessity. The more I took care of my health, the clearer my mind became, and the more energy I had to contribute to the company. And with that newfound clarity, I made one of the most important decisions of my life. I needed to change my approach, not just at work, but in how I approach success in general. For too long, I had measured my worth by my career, by how much I could achieve, and how quickly I could reach the next goal. But I realized that true success wasn't about how much I could do. It was about building something meaningful, something that would bring value not just to my clients, but to my life as well. I had to learn to redefine success. And it wasn't just about professional achievements. It was about balance, growth, and finding happiness in the journey, not just the destination. It had been 6 months since I had made the decision to change my approach. 6 months since Jack had reminded me that I didn't have to do everything alone. In that time, I had learned more about myself than I ever thought possible. The startup was thriving. We had made significant progress, and our platform was beginning to gain real traction in the market. Clients were signing on, and we had secured the attention of a few investors who believed in our vision. But the biggest change wasn't just in the company, it was in me. I had stopped defining my success solely by my career achievements. For the first time in my life, I understood that success wasn't a destination. It was a journey. I had spent so many years chasing after something external, approval from others, recognition for my work, that I had neglected the internal side of success, finding peace, balance, and fulfillment in what I was doing. I had learned to set boundaries. I began taking real breaks, going for walks, spending weekends with May, and learning to savor the moments that didn't involve work. I still worked hard, but I had found a rhythm that allowed me to feel alive, not just busy. It was incredible how much more productive and creative I had become when I wasn't constantly exhausted and stressed. But the real test came when I was faced with a decision that would once again challenge everything I had learned. One of the largest tech firms in the industry reached out to me with an offer. They had been following our startup's progress and were impressed with the work we had done. They offered me a significant position as a senior developer, with a lucrative salary and perks that I had once dreamed of. The temptation was strong. I had spent so many years struggling to build my career, and this offer seemed like the pinnacle of success. It was everything I had worked for, a prestigious job at a well-established company with a steady paycheck. It would secure my future and provide financial stability for May and me. But as I sat at my desk, staring at the email, I realized something. The old Alex, the one who was driven by ambition and the need to prove himself, would have jumped at this opportunity without hesitation. He would have seen this as the ultimate success. But now, after everything I had been through, I wasn't so sure. I thought about the startup, about the team we had built, and the impact we were making. I thought about the new perspective I had gained on what success really meant to me. I wasn't chasing after prestige anymore. I wasn't interested in just climbing the corporate ladder. I had found something far more meaningful, a chance to create, to innovate, and to work on something that I believed in, with people who shared that vision. I realized that leaving the startup now, at this crucial moment, wouldn't just be a career change. It would be a step back into a life I had left behind. It would be a return to the world of corporate pressure and expectations that had once made me miserable. I sat down and called May. She had been with me through every up and down, and I needed her perspective. May, I began, I got an offer from a big company. It's everything I thought I wanted. The salary, the status, the security. But now, I'm not sure. I don't know if it's the right move anymore. She was quiet for a moment, and then she replied, "What do you want, Alex? You've worked so hard to get to this point. You've changed so much. What does your heart tell you?" I thought about it for a while. I thought about the startup, the team, the work we had done together, and how proud I felt of what we were building. I realized that what truly mattered wasn't the title or the paycheck. It was the impact I could make, the difference I could create, and the freedom to pursue my own vision. I think I want to keep building what we've started, I said, my voice steady. I found something that feels right, something that makes me excited to get up every morning. I don't want to give that up. May smiled, and I could hear the pride in her voice. I'm proud of you, Alex. I know this is a big decision, but I support whatever you choose. And with that, I made my decision. I turned down the offer from the tech firm. It wasn't an easy choice, but it was the right one. I wasn't going to let my life be defined by external expectations anymore. I had learned that true success is about following your passion, finding purpose, and living authentically, not just collecting titles and accolades. In the weeks that followed, things continued to improve. The startup continued to grow, and we attracted more clients. Our product was becoming something people relied on. But more than that, I felt a sense of fulfillment and contentment that I had never experienced before. I knew that the path I was on was the right one for me. I had learned so much over the past year. I had learned that success is not just about achieving more. It's about being true to yourself, finding balance, and appreciating the journey along the way. I had learned that failure is not the end. It's a lesson that can propel you forward. And most importantly, I had learned that the real measure of success is not what others think of you, but how you feel about your own life and the choices you make. As I stood in the office that had once felt like a prison to me, I realized I had come full circle. I was no longer the person who needed to prove himself to others. I was the person who had found his purpose and was building a life that reflected it. And as I looked at the team around me, I knew that we were all in this together, building something that was far more valuable than just a successful business. It was a life we could all be proud of.